friends. How are you? I hope you're having a great day. I'm ready to read chapter 3 of Charlotte's Web. This one's called Escape. However, I want you to think, especially as we begin this chapter, it starts in the barn. Now, remember, Wilbur has just been sold to the Zuckermans down the road. And I want you to think about the senses. So you have 5 senses. Your sense of sight, smell, sound, taste, and feel. So this, especially at the beginning of this, you really get a good sense of all your senses for what it felt like and smelled like and everything in the barn. So be aware of that as I start to read and see if you can think about how it makes you feel. All right. The barn was very large. It was very old. It smelled of hay, and it smelled of manure. It smelled of the perspiration of tired horses and the wonderful sweet breath of patient cows. It often had a sort of peaceful smell, as though nothing bad could ever happen again in the world. It smelled of grain and of harness dressing and of axle grease and of rubber boots and of new ropes. And whenever the cat was given a fresh fish head to eat, the barn would smell of fish. But mostly it smelled of hay, for there was always hay in the great loft up overhead, and there was always hay being pitched down to the cows and the horses and the sheep. Now, I did talk about the smells, but think about your other senses and what else you noticed about that. The barn was pleasantly warm in the winter when the animals spent most of their time indoors, and it was pleasantly cool in the summer when the big doors would stand wide open in the breeze. The barn had stalls on the main floor for the work horses, that tie-ups on the main floor for the cows, and a sheepfold down below for the sheep. A pig pen down below for Wilbur, and it was full of all sorts of things that you find in barns: ladders, grindstones, pitchforks, monkey wrenches, scythes, lawnmowers, snow shovels, axe handles, milk pails, water buckets, empty grain sacks, and rusty rat traps. It was the kind of barn that swallows like to build their nests in. It's the kind of barn that children like to play in. And the whole thing was owned by Fern's uncle, Mr. Homer L. Zuckerman. Can't you just see that barn? And can't you just smell what it smells like and what it must have felt like in that barn? Oh my goodness. I love a good barn. Wilbur's new home was in the lower part of the barn, directly underneath the cows. Mr. Zuckerman knew that a manure pile is a good place to keep a young pig. Pigs need warmth, and it was warm and comfortable down there in the barn cellar on the south side. Fern came almost every day to visit him. She found an old milking stool that had been discarded, and she placed the stool in the sheepfold next to Wilbur's pen. Here she sat silently during the long afternoons, thinking and listening and watching Wilbur. The sheep soon got to know her and trusted her. So did the geese who lived with the sheep. All of the animals trusted her. She was so quiet and so friendly. Okay, so here's a picture of Wilbur in his pig pen. Now, it said it was under the cows in a manure pile. So what does that tell you about the place that Wilbur lived in? And then here's a picture, of Fern in the sheepfold watching Wilbur. Mr. Zuckerman did not allow her to take Wilbur out, and he did not allow her to get into the pig pen, but he told Fern that she could sit on the stool and watch Wilbur for as long as she wanted to. It made her happy just to be near the pig, and it made Wilbur happy to know that she was sitting there right outside his pen. But he never had any fun. No walks, no rides, no swims. One afternoon in June, when Wilbur was almost 2 months old, he wandered out into his small yard outside the barn. Fern had not yet arrived for her usual visit. Wilbur stood in the sun, feeling lonely and bored. There's never anything to do around here, he thought. He walked over slowly to his food trough and sniffed to see if anything had been overlooked at lunch. He found a small strip of a potato skin and he ate it. His back itched, so he leaned against the fence and he rubbed against the boards. When he got tired of this, I lost my place. Oh, there it is. He walked indoors. He climbed to the top of the manure pile and sat down. He didn't feel like going to sleep. He didn't feel like digging. He was tired of standing still. He was tired of lying down. I am less than 2 months old, and I am tired of living, he said. And he walked back down to the yard again. When I'm out here, he said, there's no place to go back in. When I'm indoors, there's no place to go but back out in the yard. That's where you're wrong, my friend, said a voice. Wilbur looked through the fence, and he saw the goose standing there. You don't have to stay in that dirty little yard, said the goose, who talked rather fast. One of the boards is loose. Push on it, push on it, and come on out. What, said Wilbur? Say it slower. At the risk of repeating myself, said the goose, I suggest that you come on out. It's wonderful out here. Did you say a board was loose? That I did, said the goose. Wilbur walked up to the fence and saw that the goose was right. One board was loose. He put his head down, he shut his eyes and pushed. The board gave way. In a minute, he had squeezed through the fence and was standing in the long grass outside of his yard. The goose chuckled. How does it feel to be free? She asked. I like it, said Wilbur. That is, I guess I like it. Actually, Wilbur felt kind of queer to be outside of his fence, with nothing between him and the big world. Where do you think I should go? Anywhere you like, said the goose. Go down through the orchard, root up the sod, go through the garden, dig up the radishes, root up everything, eat grass, look for corn, look for oats, run all over, skip and jump, skip and prance, go down through the orchard and stroll in the woods. The world is a wonderful place when you're young. I can see that, replied Wilbur, and he gave a jump in the air, twirled, ran a few steps, stopped, looked all around, and sniffed the smells of afternoon, and then set off, walking down through the orchard. Pausing in the shade of an apple tree, he put his strong snout into the ground and began pushing and digging and rooting. He felt very happy. He plowed up quite a piece of ground before anyone noticed him. Mrs. Zuckerman was the first to see him. She saw him from the kitchen window, and she immediately shouted for the men. Homer, she cried. Pigs out! Lurvy, pigs out! Homer, Lurvy, pigs out! He's down there under that apple tree. Oh, now the trouble starts, thought Wilbur. Now I'm going to catch it. The goose heard the racket, and she too started hollering. Run, downhill, make for the woods, she shouted to Wilbur. They'll never catch you in the woods. The Cocker Spaniel heard all of the commotion, and he ran out from the barn to join in the chase. Mr. Zuckerman heard, and he came out of the machine shed where he was mending a tool. Lurvy, the hired man, heard the noise and came up from the asparagus patch where he was pulling weeds. Everyone walked toward Wilbur, and Wilbur didn't know what to do. The woods seemed a long ways off, and anyway, he had never been down there in the woods, and he wasn't sure he would like it. Get around behind him, Lurvy, said Mr. Zuckerman, and drive him towards the barn. Take it easy, don't rush him. I'll go get a bucket of slops. The news of Wilbur's escape spread rapidly among the animals on the place. Whenever any creature broke loose on Zuckerman's farm, the event was a great interest to the others. The goose shouted to the nearest cow that Wilbur was free. And soon all of the cows knew. Then one of the cows told one of the sheep, and soon all the sheep knew. The lambs learned about it from their mothers. The horses in their stalls in the barn pricked up their ears when they heard the goose hollering, and soon the horses had all caught on to what was happening. Wilbur's out, they said. Every animal stirred and lifted its head and became excited to know that one of its friends had gotten free and was no longer pinned up or tied fast. Wilbur didn't know what to do or which way to run. It seemed like everybody was after him. If this is what it's like to be free, he thought, I think I'd rather be pinned up in my own yard. The Cocker Spaniel was sneaking up on him from one side. Lurvy, the hired man, was sneaking up on him from the other side. Mrs. Zuckerman stood ready to head him off in case he started for the garden, and now Mr. Zuckerman was coming down towards him, carrying a pail. This is awful, thought Wilbur. Why doesn't Fern come? and he began to cry. The goose took command and began giving orders. "Don't just stand there, Wilbur! Dodge about!" cried the goose. "Skip around, run towards me, slip in and out, in and out, in and out. Make for the woods, twist and turn." The cocker spaniel sprang for Wilbur's hind leg. Wilbur jumped and ran. Lurvy reached out and grabbed. Mrs. Zuckerman screamed at Lurvy. The goose cheered for Wilbur. Wilbur dodged between Lurvy's legs. Lurvy missed Wilbur and grabbed the cocker spaniel instead. Nicely done, cried the goose. Try it again. Run downhill, suggested the cows. Run towards me, yelled the gander. Run uphill, cried the sheep. Turn and twist, honked the goose. Jump and dance, said the rooster. Oh, poor Wilbur. Everybody's trying to tell him what to do. There's the Zuckermans. There's Mr. Zuckerman with his slops and Mrs. Zuckerman guarding the garden. And there's Lurvy trying to catch him. And the dog. I think Wilbur's so confused he doesn't know which way to go. Look out for Lurvy, cried the cows. Look out for Zuckerman, yelled the gander. Watch out for the dog, cried the sheep. Listen to me, screamed the goose. Poor Wilbur was so dazed and frightened by all of the hullabaloo, he didn't like being the center of all this fuss. He tried to follow the instructions that his friends were giving him, but he couldn't run downhill and uphill at the same time, and he couldn't turn and twist when he was jumping and dancing, and he was crying so hard he could barely see anything that was happening. After all, Wilbur was still a very young pig, not much more than a baby, really. He wished Fern were there to take him in her arms and comfort him. When he looked up and he saw Mr. Zuckerman standing quite close to him, holding a pail of warm slops, he felt relieved. He lifted his nose and sniffed. The smell was delicious. Warm milk, potato skins, wheat middlings, Kellogg's cornflakes, and a popover left from the Zuckerman's breakfast. Come, pig, said Mr. Zuckerman, tapping the pail. Come, pig. No, Wilbur took a step towards the pail. No, said the goose. It's a pale trick, Wilbur. Don't fall for it. He's trying to lure you back into captivity. He's appealing to your stomach. Wilbur didn't care. The food smelled appetizing. He took another step towards the pail. Pig, said Mr. Zuckerman in a very kind voice, and he began walking slowly towards the barnyard, looking all about him innocently, like he didn't know this little white pig was following along behind him. You'll be sorry, called the goose. Wilbur didn't care. He kept walking towards the pail of slops. You'll miss your freedom, honked the goose. An hour of freedom is worth a barrel of slops. Wilbur didn't care. When Mr. Zuckerman reached the pig pen, he climbed over the fence and he poured the slops into the trough. Then he pulled the loose board away from the fence so that there was a wide hole for Wilbur to walk through. Reconsider, cried the goose. Wilbur paid no attention. He stepped through the fence and into his yard. He walked to the trough and took a good long drink of slops, sucking in the milk hungrily and chewing the popover. Oh, it was good to be home again. While Wilbur ate, Lurvy fetched a hammer and some 8-penny nails and nailed the board back in place. Then he and Mr. Zuckerman leaned lazily on the fence. Mr. Zuckerman scratched Wilbur's back with a stick. He's quite a pig, said Lurvy. Yes, he'll make a good pig, said Mr. Zuckerman. Wilbur heard the words of praise. He felt the warm milk inside of his stomach. He felt the pleasant rubbing of the stick along his itchy back. He felt peaceful and happy and sleepy. This had been a tiring afternoon, and it was still only 4 o'clock, but Wilbur was ready for bed. I'm really too young to go out into the world all alone, he thought, as he lay down. Oh my goodness. Sometimes things don't turn out the way we think they are. Wilbur was excited to go out into the world and to get out of his pen, and then he got out there, and it wasn't nearly as much fun as he thought it was going to be. All right. Why do you think maybe Wilbur wasn't so happy with his new home in the pig pen? Things to think about. I hope you enjoyed that chapter, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon.